The room was small enough for silence to feel like another piece of furniture, leaning against the wall, waiting. Through the cracked window, the night air of Chicago drifted in, carrying the sound of passing cars, a distant horn, the soft shuffle of people trying to get home before trouble found them first. Somewhere in that dim space, a young man held a harmonica as if it were a living thing, warm and restless in his hands. He pressed it to his lips not for comfort, but for truth. People would later say he played it like a horn, like a saxophone, like a voice too large for the world that raised him. But in that moment, he was just a boy running from a childhood that never gave him room to breathe. Every note he bent felt like a window opening, a door cracking, a life shifting towards something he couldn't name yet. Before fame, before the Cadillacs and the neon lights, before the bruises, the headlines, and the long nights that blurred into one another, there was only a breath, a spark, and a sound that would one day change the blues forever. Childhood, origins, and the first steps of a restless journey. He came into the world without a birth certificate, without a name anyone could agree on, and without the safety a child deserved. Some said he was born in 1930. A government form filed later claimed 1923. What never changed was the town, Marksville, Louisiana, a place where the air carried equal parts heat and judgment, and where a child born out of wedlock could become a secret no one wanted to claim out loud. His mother was young, still tied to her parents' beliefs, and terrified of the shame that followed a woman who had a baby without a husband. She didn't abandon him out of cruelty. She was pushed out of his life by the older voices around her. His father, half black and half native, took the boy instead, not out of generosity, but out of stubbornness. He placed him in the care of relatives on a farm in Alexandria, where music drifted between the days like a quiet visitor. By the time he was 8, the world had already taught him too much about loneliness. But that was the year he picked up a harmonica. It wasn't a toy. It was the only instrument he could afford, the cheapest doorway into the sound he really wanted, the bold, brassy cry of a saxophone. So he did what poor children with big dreams have always done. He made something small feel enormous. He played until the metal bent. He broke harmonicas, fixed them, broke them again, and learned the insides the way some boys learn the engines of old cars. Music wasn't just around him, it lived in him. His father could play just about anything, guitar, violin, accordion, even the harp, but trouble followed that man like a second shadow. He ended up in prison after shooting someone, leaving the boy once again in the hands of relatives who didn't hold him for long. His uncle fell into violence too, and the boy learned early that the world could take people away in an instant. When his father was released from prison, he brought his son back to his mother. But peace didn't last. The boy was already drifting toward a kind of independence no child should need. He acted older than his years, chasing thrills, getting into trouble, and catching the attention of women far beyond his age. He didn't stay long. A new household, new rules, and new bruises pushed him back out the door. So he ran. He left school at 12, slipped through the cracks of the South, and caught trains like other boys caught cold. Arkansas, St. Louis, Memphis. Each place gave him a corner to play on, a few coins, and a lesson he would carry later. In Helena, he heard Sonny Boy Williamson coming out of a jukebox, and something inside him stood up. Here was the sound he had been chasing in his mind. And when he met Rice Miller, the man calling himself Sonny Boy now, he found a guide, a mentor, someone who saw the spark in a runaway kid. By the time he reached Chicago at 14, thin from hunger and heavy with determination, he already knew two things. The South couldn't hold him, and the harmonica would. Chicago didn't give out easy welcomes, but it recognized hunger when it saw it. Maxwell Street was loud, cracked, overflowing with people trying to make a dollar out of a dime. It was the kind of place where a musician had to shout with his hands, not his voice, and where a harmonica could disappear under the weight of guitars, drums, and shouting crowds. But he didn't disappear. He learned to rise above the noise. He met Big Bill Brunzi and Tampa Red, men whose names carried weight on the streets, and their approval gave him room to breathe. A small neighborhood label cut his first demo, and for a moment the world felt like it might bend his way. But everything changed when he crossed paths with Muddy Waters. Older, already respected, already carrying the sound of the Delta like it was stitched into his skin. Muddy didn't just hear talent, he heard fire, and he opened the door. The band they built together, Muddy, Little Walter, Jimmy Rogers, Big Crawford, Babyface Leroy, wasn't just a group, it was a force. They played with the kind of intensity that dared other musicians to keep up, and most nights they couldn't. Clubs across Chicago learned to fear them, because whenever they walked in, they didn't come to join the lineup, they came to take it. Still, he wanted something more. Every time he stepped forward to play, the harmonica got swallowed by the band. And so one night, in a quiet act of rebellion that would reshape blues history, he cupped a microphone in his hands, pushed it against his harmonica, and sent both through a guitar amplifier. The sound cracked, distorted, then bloomed, raw, heavy, electrified. It was the first time anyone had made a harmonica talk like a horn section, cry like a saxophone, or rage like a man with nothing left to lose. Crowds felt it before they understood it. Chicago felt it like a changed wind. And Leonard Chess, who ran a small but ambitious label, felt it most of all. During a Muddy Waters recording session, the young musician cut an instrumental track, a piece called Your Cat Will Play. Chess didn't know how to market it, didn't know what to do with a harmonica leading the way, but one afternoon he played it with the studio windows open, and a group of women began dancing in the street. That was all the proof he needed. He renamed the track Juke, pressed it, and watched the world move. Within a week it hit #1 on the Billboard R&B charts, 8 weeks at the top, 20 on the charts, bigger than anything Chess Records had touched, bigger than Muddy, bigger than Etta James, bigger than Chuck Berry. In one breath, one wild, electric, unstoppable breath, he became the most influential harmonica player in the world. Hits followed: My Babe, Sad Hours, Mean Old World, Blues with a Feeling, a Cadillac for every season. Crowds split by race laws, but united when the rope dropped and the beat took over. Women fighting to leave the club with him. Fans breaking doors, breaking windows, breaking rules just to hear him play. For a while, he lived inside the glow of the spotlight. He had changed the sound of a city. He had changed the sound of the blues. And for a moment, it seemed he had outrun every shadow that followed him from the South. Success can be loud, but the fall from it is quieter, like a room where someone has just walked out, leaving the door half open and the air trembling. For a long time, he had lived in a world that roared for him, but the roar began to thin, replaced by the kind of silence that creeps in after too many late nights and too many bad choices. The violence came first. It followed him like an old debt. In the clubs, on the streets, outside the doors of women he should never have trusted, trouble found him each time. A bottle to the face, a knife in the dark, a brick through his Cadillac window, a jealous husband waiting in the alley. He wasn't built for peace, not anymore. The streets knew his temper, and he knew theirs. Police beatings became a terrible rhythm in his life. Chicago officers cracked his skull more than once, leaving him dazed in the middle of the road with blood drying on his collar. Doctors warned him that one more blow might end everything, but the world didn't give him breaks, and he didn't know how to take them. Drinking filled the space where music used to live. Moonshine first, heroin later. He had once been the boy who refused alcohol, sipping nothing stronger than a soda. Now he was the man draining bottles until the label blurred, the man shooting up to quiet the noise inside his chest. People said he wasn't a good fighter, but he fought anyway. Fought strangers, lovers, himself. The band left him, one musician at a time. They said the money wasn't right, that he couldn't be trusted, that his temper burned too hot. And without them, the stage didn't feel the same. Chicago still booked him, but the rooms felt smaller, the applause thinner, the nights colder. Then came the music's betrayal. Rock and roll was rising, swallowing the blues the way the blues had once swallowed country. Teenagers wanted new voices, new rhythms, new idols. And the man who had once electrified the harmonica felt the ground shift beneath his feet. He tried to play as he always had, but the sound wasn't there. His breath broke too easily. His pitch wavered. The crowd noticed. Everyone noticed. Europe offered him a second wind. The Rolling Stones invited him overseas, and for a moment he was lifted again by the thrill of stages that loved him without conditions. But even there the old habits followed. Gin and rum swallowed before walking on stage. Arguments that turned into threats. Legends whispered that he once tried to stab a young Rod Stewart during a drunken rage. He laughed about it later, but the truth was heavier than the joke. By his mid-30s, his body had begun to fail him. Years of beatings, drugs, cold nights, and hard living carved deep lines into his face. He moved like an old man, limping from the injuries he never let heal. He looked 50 when he was barely 37, and yet he kept coming back to the stage. Even with a swollen head, even when doctors warned him not to blow another note, he still lifted the harmonica. Maybe it was loyalty, maybe addiction, or maybe he knew, even then, that the sound was the last piece of himself he truly recognized. In America, the blues had always been a mirror, a place where people could see their own wounds reflected back at them. And for a long time, his sound held the weight of that mirror. But by the late 50s and early 60s, the country was changing faster than the music that built it. Teenagers wanted rock and roll. Radio stations pushed new names, new faces, new rhythms. The stage that once lifted him now seemed to lean away, and America watched him with the complicated gaze it reserved for fallen legends. Part admiration, part distance, part sorrow. Still, musicians across the country never stopped saying his name. B.B. King spoke of him with respect. Muddy Waters needed his harmonica on record after record, even long after their friendship had cracked and mended again. Younger players studied his phrasing, his breath, the way he bent notes as if he were bending time. In the bars of Chicago, old men swore nobody ever touched a harmonica the way he did. To them, he wasn't just a musician, he was the sound of the city itself. But overseas, the story shifted. Europe, especially England, treated him like something precious they had discovered, rather than something they had outgrown. The Rolling Stones brought him on tour, not out of charity, but out of reverence. Crowds in London and across Europe packed the rooms just to watch him lift the harmonica to his lips. They didn't care about his arrests, his temper, or the rumors that followed him like a second shadow. They heard the genius first. And yet the warmth never fully reached him. He felt foreign on those stages, respected, applauded, but far from home. He drank more, spoke less, and carried himself like a man divided between who he had been and who the world wanted him to be. Europe loved him, but he didn't always love it back. Some nights he said the audiences didn't understand him. Other nights he didn't understand himself. Still, his influence seeped through their music. Bands across England copied his tone, covered his songs, tried to hold his fire in their own breath. His name traveled farther than he ever did, carried by records, by memories, by stories passed from one guitarist to another. In America, he was a legend. In Europe, he was a revelation. And in both places, people sensed the same truth, that no matter how troubled his life became, the sound he created would outlive him by decades, maybe centuries. A sound born from hunger, hurt, migration, survival. A sound that belonged to everyone and no one at the same time. In the final years of his life, the days moved like fading notes, slow, uneven, weighed down by memories he could no longer outrun. Chicago still held pieces of him, but even the city seemed to whisper that time was running out.